If you're dealing through trauma, one of the first things that I would recommend, and of course, obviously I'm not a psychologist, I'm just telling you things that I have learned, that I have been able to implement, that have helped me, that I have seen firsthand work, is really understanding where is the trigger coming from. What's going on, guys? Thank you so much for tuning in to yet another episode for Walking Manifestator. I'm your host, Alexa Benya, and in today's conversation, I really want to dive deep into something that I think most of us have experienced at one point or another. However, society, the norms, religion, perspective, family, whatever it might be, has taught us to ignore it, or maybe just suppress it, or maybe act as if it never actually happened. This is actually trauma, right? Trauma, I feel that for the longest time, we have been taught that it is something that happened to us, right? A situation that we encountered, and then you get the contrary conversation starter, which is it's a situation that you went through and it's something that happened for you versus, to you. And a lot of the times that can ruffle a lot of feathers, because it's kind of like telling a person, like, don't worry about it, see it as just something that was a life lesson and just see the good that came about. And although that has been something that for me personally has helped me, I also believe that validating something can help you in that process of healing. Now, a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today is driven from inspiration of two books. This is by Dr. Gabor Mate, Gabor, and he has two latest books that are all-time best-sellings. It's The Myth of Normal and The Realm of Hungry Ghost. Essentially, it talks a lot about trauma and identifying what are the behaviors that are now being reacted in your present that is affecting your life. So I want to start off by saying something that really took me by surprise, and I never had seen it this way, but it makes so much sense. When we talk about trauma, we often think that it's something that we went through, right? It's a situation that we encountered. It's something that happened to us, something that we now feel that if we talk about might open up a old wound and might cause us to have problems. Now, the thing about this is, and this is something that I personally felt really resonated with me, is trauma is really the scar that's left behind from the situation you went through. So I want to dissect this really quick for a second. For the longest time, I thought trauma was actually the event itself, but in reality, trauma is the scar that was left from the event itself, right? So let's say you had let's say boyfriend, girlfriend at one point in your life, right? And this person cheated on you. You might think the traumatic, behavior or situation came from, you actually being cheated on, but in reality, it's how you perceive that information that now the scar left behind is going to cause you to have problems with maybe other people in your life, right? It's going to cause all these situations to unravel when it comes to a new relationship if you didn't heal from that scar that happened in your past. And this is something that I think most people, when we're talking about trauma, traumatic situations, a lot of the times we're taught either ignore it or we're taught to identify with it. And one of the unique perspectives that Dr. Gabor was mentioning is a lot of the times we get so consumed by identifying with either the label of I'm a survivor or I am a victim, that we make that our ultimate role in life. Therefore, we act out in multiple situations from that conditioning that happened to us. Carl Jung, highly recommend his books and also a lot of his teachings, but he also talks a lot about how it's important to identify the thorn that is hurting you in your life, because if you don't pull that thorn out, it will forever be something that as you glaze through it, you are always going to be reminded of. So for example, right, there's a lot of people sometimes that we go through situations in life where we have childhood problems. We have situations in life where we feel like we need to go and see a shrink, or we need to go and see a psychologist, whatever you want to call it. And nowadays, people will normalize that as part of that healing process, or sometimes they will frown upon it and say, wow, you need to go to a shrink, like is there something wrong with you, like do you need meds? Or maybe they identify with needing that they're not actually healing what they need to heal. So something that for me personally has always been very interesting is when I was younger, when I was little and I was living with my grandparents, I was sent to a psychologist because I was misbehaving and I was getting in trouble. So it was kind of like, you have to go, if not, you're gonna get in more trouble type thing. And I share this with you because I remember when I was with that psychologist, I remember answering everything she wanted to hear. I remember saying exactly what she needed me to say in order to validate where she wanted me to be, okay? And as humans, we're very smart, and until you become aware of really what's hurting you, and until you become aware of really what you need to improve on, you're always going to lie to yourself. You're always going to tell yourself something to simply calm yourself down, or to simply downplay the situation, to simply tell whatever you need to tell to the person that is asking the questions what they want to hear. And I think this is the part that for me really helped me as I was growing up, was really separating myself from that identification of, oh, this happened to me, poor me, I didn't have my parents, poor me, we didn't have money, poor me, I went through traumatic situations that happened in my life. A lot of those things, as I now have reflected back on them, I have learned that that is not who I am. That was merely a situation that I went through, that now, depending on how I choose to respond to it in my current present now, it is going to dictate my future. It is going to dictate how I raise my kids. It's going to dictate the relationships, friendships that I have. So if you're dealing through trauma, one of the first things that I would recommend, and of course, obviously I'm not a psychologist, I'm just telling you things that I have learned, that I have been able to implement, that have helped me, that I have seen firsthand work, is really understanding where is the trigger coming from. When you can identify the trigger, when you can identify what the problem is, you can start working toward a solution. But most of us, we never really sit down and think about what is actually hurting our now. Not what hurt us then, but how are we playing this out in our current reality. So one of the things that he talks about in his book is there's, the needs of children, right? The children, what you need, and actually when you're growing up, what is essential. And one of them is unconditional love and acceptance. So if you are somebody that did not receive that unconditional love and acceptance, more than likely as you grew up, you were somebody that was going to react a certain way with other people, and now maybe be somebody that was desperate, maybe be somebody that was seeking validation from others. Now, another thing that's very important is not forced to make a relationship work. So if you were a kid and you had your parents, or maybe you didn't have your parents, whoever it was that was looking after you, these are certain situations that if you were seeking that external validation from that person and you felt the need to make that relationship work, that goes back into that unconditional love that you didn't feel. Therefore, there was a void that was created there. Another thing he talks about is freedom to experience all emotions. So maybe you were somebody that was growing up in a household where they told you, don't cry, right? Boys don't cry, or you have to be a big girl. You should not be, allowing your emotions to get the best of you, whatever. But the reality is that we have to be allowed to feel our emotions in order for us to be able to release that emotion that is currently being experienced through our physiology, right? Our body. And one of the most important ones that I personally think is something that I have started to implement in my life more, and I'm still trying to make it more of an effort, is connecting with nature, free play. being in that energy in which you can go outside, allow yourself to feel the grass with your feet, be able to play and enjoy yourself. I recently came back from a trip. We went glamping out in an area out in Austin, and it was interesting because as I was there with the family, I got to do things that I had not done when I was younger. So I went with the family friends of that weren't like directly my family, right? And we went over and they had the whole like playing tennis, they had, you know, playing volleyball, they had going on paddleboarding. Like, it was a completely different experience from things that I personally grew up with. And now that I'm an adult, I have learned to really explore these things, like this outdoor side of me, that as I was playing, I felt like a kid. I was full of adrenaline. I was super excited. I didn't have to have a sip of coffee. I just felt like I had a bunch of energy. I was out there playing tennis. I was out there playing, you know, with the volleyball. I was playing volleyball. I went paddleboarding. Like, I did so many things that to me just felt so exhilarating and brought this like different perspective, different side of me that allowed me to feel like I was just being me. I was just being an authentic side of me that even though I hadn't really been in the past, it really felt good to explore that side. So when we're talking about trauma, when we're talking about things that can help us break free from those patterns, one of the things is allowing ourselves to actually find what it is that we are currently finding as purposeful in our life, right? What is something that you can say, you know what? I enjoy doing this. And I know that at one point in my life, I encountered a very traumatic experience. And I know that now identifying it, it is acting out in relationships. It is acting out in how I raise my kids. It's acting out in how I behave with my parents, whatever. By identifying it, we can start becoming vulnerable enough in order for us to admit what we need to now change. And this is something that, again, to each their own, and whatever resonates with you, great. Whatever doesn't resonate with you, ignore it. But one of the things that really resonated with me is, I think that for the longest time, I was identifying with that victim mentality, right? Poor me. And maybe you're somebody that can resonate with that. Maybe you're somebody that your dad left you, your mom left you, both left you, or you had, you know, situations that were even worse, right? That happened to you. And for the longest time now, you haven't trusted people. Maybe you feel like everybody's out to get you. And if you've seen any of the other episodes we've talked about, we talk a lot about manifestations. Manifestations is directly correlated with what you're manifesting in your external reality based on what you perceive in your internal reality. So when you think about it from that perspective, you start realizing that that trauma that you lived many, many years ago is now manifesting in your present reality because that scar is still there and you're not conscious enough about it. Therefore, you're acting that situation over and over and over again. And you see, for the longest time, I was raised with the mentality of there's no friends. Like, there's no friends. You shouldn't trust anybody. You'll probably laugh about this, but I actually have, and I am going to be removing it or covering it up, don't know yet, but I have a tattoo that says literally, trust no one, even your shadow abandons you in the dark. Like, gosh, that was so dark, right? And I'm sharing this with you from a place of vulnerability because I want you to realize that we all have perspectives that we've grown up with, and we have all been conditioned in one way or another. And when I would hear the people that were raising me tell me, hey, there's nobody you can trust, there's nobody that you can believe in because people are always gonna screw you over, that imprinted on me. And as I was growing up, I was pushing away people that actually had great intentions, but because of that old programming that I had, I wasn't actually open to receiving that love. I wasn't open to receiving that relationship, friendship, whatever it is. So if you're in this journey of healing and if you're in this journey of, you know, taking care of the things that you need to take care of, the first thing is identifying it and identifying how it is actually playing out in your current reality. And this is one of the reasons why I personally think that there's a problem with, you know, let's say a psychiatrist saying like, no, you need to come every Friday, and if you don't come, that means that you're falling behind with the progress that you could have made, and if you don't take your meds, you're doing wrong, and la 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 la. I personally think that that's handicapping you, because that's making you believe that you need that person in order for you to fix the trauma, that you are the only one that can fix it. You know, I can sit here and tell you the recipe on how to make the world's best cake. However, if you don't actually do the work, you're not gonna make it happen, right? And I think that that's the part that for me, when I was sharing the story about, you know, going to a psychiatrist when I was little because I was getting in trouble and they sent me there, I remember being in that chair and literally looking at the psychiatrist, and like she was telling me everything that, you know, she was asking me the questions and, you know, what is hurting me and la la la. And I remember looking at her and literally just like looking at this person, I was like, what are you gonna do for me? Like, even if I sat here and tell you everything that's really bothering me, how are you going to change my life? How are you going to make me better? And the reality is that she couldn't. All she could do is listen to me. All she could do is give me advice. But in reality, it took me going through the trials that I went through in order for me to now realize and go back and say, wow, I had to be honest with myself. And being honest with myself allowed me to start healing. And being honest with myself allowed me to start realizing the things that I still need to heal. And I think that this is a misconception. A lot of people feel like, oh, when you're in this like spiritual journey and like this growth journey, automatically everything is just perfect. And, you know, that means that you should never get, you know, upset. Or even they've asked interviews to Tony Robbins, like, does this mean you're like just perfect? He's like, no, I get mad sometimes. They've asked Neville Goddard. They asked, you know, masterminds in the industry, like, does this mean that like because of the things that you've already done, like you're just a robot and you're always doing everything by the book? The answer is no. For as long as you're a human, there's always going to be something that you're going to need to work through. But the thing here is that these tools now are in your toolkit, which allow you to say, I recognize this. Let's change that narrative. Let's change whatever it is that I'm perceiving in this reality. Let's change the verbiage that I'm using with myself. One of the things that I personally have seen in my growth has been when I'm trying to change something, and I read this in a book where it said you can change your first, you know, thought, but you can control your second thought. And it's so important to acknowledge that, because maybe you're somebody that's prone to judge people, right? Maybe there's something in this conversation that I said that you're already judging. But that was like autopilot, right? That just came. But at the end of the day, you have the power to control the next thought, which is, what was it about what she said that triggered me to say, I want to judge this? And this is how I've learned to start slowly making changes. I recognize what it is that I am repeating, what it is that I am saying, and then I focus on where I would want to be, and then I repeat it. So as an example, let's say for the longest time, I considered myself not pretty. I did not love myself. I did not think that I was actually worthy. I felt very, very low. And now when I look at myself in the mirror, I'm able to say, wow, you're gorgeous. I love you. Whether somebody else or not considers me beautiful, that's not my concern. But the thing here is that it took time for me to be able to say that to myself. It took time for me to be able to look at myself in the mirror and say, I love you. You're freaking awesome. And it doesn't matter if you're not where you want to be. In my eyes, you are exactly who you need to be right now. And this is something that I personally started repeating. At first, I had to identify, like, why am I being insecure about, you know, the way that my legs, my body, my face looks? Like, why am I being insecure about that? And I was like, oh, because when I was little, I was called names. Oh, and because when I was little, I was told X, Y, and Z. And oh, because when I was little, they would make fun of my outfits. So I identify the thoughts, the words that I was telling myself, and then I was like, hey, okay, that's not who you are now, though. That's not what is the problem here. The problem is that you keep telling yourself this, and therefore you're believing this. So whatever it is that you take away from today's conversation, I just want you to know that you are able to grow and you are able to heal, but it starts by you choosing and by you identifying what it is that you want out of life. For the longest time, there's many people that have said like, oh, well, you know, there's only certain things that you're saying just because maybe you want something out of me, or maybe you're trying to come across a certain way. We need to stop worrying about what others think about us and start worrying about what we think about ourselves. And that will allow us to start paving the way into healing and truly becoming a better version of ourselves. With that being said, I want to thank you for tuning in into today's episode. I appreciate all of your support. I see the comments, I see the emails, and I just want to say I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. I mentioned this and I will continue to mention this. My goal in this podcast is to inspire others to recognize that you are able and you are worthy and you are able to always become a better version of yourself. So with that being said, please feel free to check down below all the links for our free mastermind classes that we have, our courses that we have, and if there is anything that you want us to talk about in these episodes, please let us know so that we can talk about it in our next episode. With that being said, I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you on the next one.